Welcome, fantastic friends, to the new episode of the Fancast at 4 podcast, the number one Fantastic Four fancasting podcast on the internet.
Presumably.
Even plausibly. I'm Dan Bettenhausen.
And I'm Jack Mayer.
And we are your hosts as we venture into the what-ifs of Marvel's first family, who will be appearing in Phase 6 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
With Matt Shakman set to direct the MCU's Fantastic Four film, we still can explore what it would be like if a different director was behind the camera and who might they cast.
This week, we are excited to have our friend Paul DiNuzzo, aka PLD, joining us. Paul, thank you for agreeing to come on our show. Please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
First off, thanks for inviting me. I know this is a little bit of a long time in coming.
It's a big get for us.
Oh, God, now you're just... No, but I'm really happy to be here. If you know me, I do have my own show. It's called From the PLD Projects Network. I'm an old guy who loves films, loves music. We do all sorts of podcasting there. I did the work for a little while for a little trivia show called Movie Trivia Schmodown, which I think most of your listeners probably have heard of.
Familiar.
And also I've worked a lot with Ben Bateman and Andrew Guy on the Action Industries YouTube channel as well, which again, I believe most of your listeners are probably at least familiar with in some way, shape, or form.
And that's how we all got connected. I'd say the three of us got more so connected than even the Schmodown.
Oh, absolutely. The action army as it is. But beyond that, I work I'm a public safety dispatcher. I do answer 911 calls and I tell the police, fire, and EMS where to go. Sometimes that means to tell them to go to hell if they're pissing me off. But beyond that, I've always loved movies. I've loved movies since a very young age. My father took me to movies almost every week. It seems like he used to pile up the whole neighborhood in my the station wagon. We go to the drive-in and all summer long. It's been a part of my life, and I couldn't imagine life without it.
Well, I'd also be remiss to say you and I share a bond that goes deeper than most can understand, and that is being part of the Chicago Bears fandom and the pain and misery that has brought us for many years. So I like I said, I couldn't go without saying that. There is hope, which scares me. We have some hope for the future, but that could go out.
We've been there before with some hope. We've had hope before, and it has killed us. But this feels a little different. I feel like we take a little bit of a bigger step than usual. So fingers crossed.
I agree.
I zoned out during football talk, but I'm back now. Like I said, it's great to have you here, Paul, especially after Jake passed. Anyways, we are very, very excited to have the director that we were featured this week. Yeah, I would say this director really blows us away even. He is an American film director and producer who is best known for big budget action films that typically utilize fast-cutting, stylized cinematography, a multitude of special effects, and recently, drones. And he uses explosions.
A lot of them.
A lot of explosions.
Quite a bit.
His films have grossed more than $7.8 billion worldwide, making him one of the most commercially successful directors ever. However, despite his commercial success, his films are generally held in low esteem by film critics. He has never been nominated for an Oscar, but he has been nominated for multiple Kids, Teen, and People's Choice Awards, and has been nominated and won multiple MTV Movie Awards and multiple Razzies. This week, we are featuring the one and only Michael Bay. Paul and Jack, what else comes to mind when you think of Michael Bay?
I'll say this. Michael Bay, to me, is an American icon. Not exactly for being a good filmmaker, but for at least providing popcorn makers with something to do while we watch their movies, because we need a lot of popcorn for his movies. They're all explosions, all action, all fun, very dumb fun. I'm not going to lie. It's very, very dumb fun, but that's okay. That's okay. We need the Michael Bays of the world, I think, to just kind of juxtapose against some of the better, more classic filmmakers. Michael Bay knows what he's doing, and you know who Michael Bay is. And if you don't like him, you're not going to like any of his movies. But if you give yourself into it, you can have a fun time with a Michael Bay movie. I almost always leave a Michael Bay movie probably smiling a little bit, maybe a little dumber, but smiling.
We called him an American filmmaker. Emphasis, I would say, particularly on American.
Yes.
You could have a drinking game of every single one of this guy's movies where if you take a shot every time you see an American flag waving in the sun, you'd be pretty hammered. And if you were watching one of the movies we're going to discuss later, you'd probably throw up because God is the editing fast.
So I will say, and I'm not trying to make this sound like a backhanded compliment, but the more surface level his movies are, I think the better. Anytime they
absolutely.
try and get lost in lore and convoluted ideas, the worse they become.
We end up with Pearl Harbor.
Yeah,
basically.
that or the Transformers sequels come to mind.
Yes.
But be it really, the more kind of just focus on the action, the pace, the speed, the violence, the explosions, the more fun you're going to have.
Although I would also argue 13 Hours isn't terrible.
Yeah.
I actually think outside the Transformers universe, Michael Bay is definitely a fun movie to watch, and he has some interesting choices. 13 Hours is definitely one of those. I think Pain and Gain has a lot to do with that as well. I think he's
a lot of choices made in that movie.
Definitely a lot of choices, man. So,
well, I think this is a great segue into our first segment, which is 4 fantastic films. Here we will discuss 4 great films directed by Michael Bay.
The first one was your choice, Paul,
Yes.
and that is 1996's The Rock.
This is definitively.
Tell us a little bit about The Rock.
This is definitively my favorite Michael Bay movie, and actually my favorite 90s action movie, and one of my favorite movies of all time for what it is. It is, I think, the epitome of 90s action. If you think of 90s action, it's probably going to come up to your lips because it's got 3 great actors giving great performances, which is what really elevates the material to be iconic. Back in the 90s, when you had a good actor commit to these kind of roles, it gave it a certain level that kind of is missing as we go forward. I mean, Sean Connery is basically making another Bond movie. That's what it is for him. His draws, it's basically a Bond sequel. You got Nick Cage getting to be Nick Cage in the cagiest way possible.
And then you've got Michael Biehn.
And then you got Michael Biehn as well for 2 seconds. I know what you're doing there. I see what you're doing there, and I love you for it. I hate you for it. I love you for it. Come on. You got to give it to me.
Who's the third, Paul? Who's the third actor that you were going to talk about?
It was the one and only, the legendary Mr. Ed Harris.
For our listeners who may not know Paul, he is arguably the biggest Ed Harris fan on the face of the planet, if not the galaxy or known universe.
I don't even think there's an argument.
Could be. It's one of those things that like it happens. Like sometimes you glom onto something. When I was younger, I saw him in The Abyss, and the resurrection scene really just like, I was like, that's acting. That's great. I loved that whole sequence. And for whatever reason, no one else liked him. So he got not that they didn't like him, but no one else really touted him as like their favorite actor. So it's one of those things like, it's almost like an indie band, right? Like that's mine actor. That's the one I like. And so it's almost like he's my personal actor, if that makes any sense. But The Rock itself that's why I think it's because, and honestly, and I'll say it, and this is why Ed Harris makes that movie for me, because he's like the villain, but he's not really a villain. He's an antagonist. He does some stupid things and he does some evil-esque things, but at heart, you almost agree with what he's doing. Like you understand him at least. You empathize with his character. He's not this villainous, like mustache swirling evil bad guy out to rule the world or to kill the president or anything else. He just wants justice, and it's kind of something you can sink your teeth into. It's a one-time Michael Bay actually kind of feels like he's making, well, that maybe like is at 13 Hours. He makes some actually good commentary that works as a core to the action-packed thrill ride we get. That's some of the best performances in there. I think he's my favorite. He's definitely my favorite part of this film. But I also love Sean and Nick Cage's chemistry together as well. So that actually works well. All three parts serve their purpose to a perfect degree.
Until recently, it was his only movie that was fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. And I think I can understand why. It is probably his most accessible movie.
Yeah.
It's got some of his most iconic lines. Winners go home and fuck the prom queen.
The shower
line
sequence
that he himself quoted later.
He's the only kind of director that's arrogant enough to quote himself. I love it. I love it for that.
And it works. It works.
It completely does. The shower room sequence. I can't not mention the shower room sequence. That's my favorite sequence in the whole movie. It's so tense, so powerful. Getting Ed Harris and Michael Biehn together like that, again, from The Abyss, both of them from The Abyss in that way. That whole sequence just elevates the whole movie for me. The tension is so thick. It's so well crafted, well shot, exciting, tense, and you just feel it. Like you just feel like you're there. So I needed to say that too before I forgot.
It's a really fun movie.
Totally. And an all-time great protagonist hero name in Stanley Goodspeed, Nick Cage's character. I think you all really covered why this movie's great. I love it. It is definitely a top 100 movie for me. Just action solid, the intensity, the thrills, like you said, and Ed Harris' performance as not so much a villain, but the antagonist who has a noble cause, I think make this movie really work and really put Michael Bay on the map.
Yes.
Is really arguably damn good start to his filmmaking career.
And what a cast! Like even beyond the big three, you got like John Spencer, David Morse, John C. McGinley's in there, Tony Todd, Bokeem Woodbine,
Philip Baker Hall in like a minor role.
Right, exactly. Xander Berkeley's in there. I mean, you got so many great players in there, just in bit roles. Every time you turn around, you're like, oh, it's that guy. Oh, it's that guy. Oh, it's that guy. And when you have that kind of thing, Tony Todd, exactly. William Forsythe. It's just a great cast.
Speaking of big giant casts, let's move on to our second film a few years later, and that's 1998's Armageddon. This was my choice. This 2.5 hour beaut has a strong nostalgic place in my heart. Is it a good movie? That's for you to decide, but I love it nonetheless. There is so much. It is probably less than the sum of its 2.5 hour parts, but some of those parts are wonderful.
Definitely a magical film. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's silly. This is probably the most Michael Bay-esque movie that I know of. When we talk about American Icon, this is the American movie. This is like the American action movie. It's all rah American. We even have a line in there at one point, like where they talk about like the Americans doing this, the Americans doing that. But what works for me in this one is everything has its right place. You got Bruce Willis, who's always going to play Bruce Willis. You got Ben Affleck, who's being probably taking that step out of things. He's taking a step into his next role in life, so to speak.
Year after Good Will Hunting.
Exactly. After that, you get again one of those things where you have that large cast. You got Billy Bob Thornton, you got Liv Tyler, you got Keith David in a smaller role.
Jason Isaacs,
Patton,
Owen Wilson, Steve Buscemi, Michael Clark Duncan. The list goes on and on.
Absolutely. Even Uno Kier is a psychologist, which I love. I love him in that smaller role there.
Great.
Love that. But it's like a rock and roll movie, which is why you have like the Aerosmith big song, like I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. You got Bon Jovi in the soundtrack. You got Journey on the soundtrack. It's like these American. It's the soundtrack in the whole movie. It's all a big rock concert. If a rock concert was made into an action movie, this is what you get.
A rock concert where a rock is hurtling at the earth, basically. It is, I think, maybe up until recently, I think it's Michael Bay's goofiest movie.
Oh, for sure.
And I think that directors like Michael Bay are better when they're goofy.
Yes.
I watched this movie probably more than I watch any other Michael Bay movie, just because it's so much fun to put on. But it also has like enough of an emotional core that I'm invested in the characters and I want to see where the journey goes, even though I already know what the journey is. The journey does end with Don't Want to Miss a Thing while Liv Tyler is being fondled by Ben Affleck, but it's still fun. It's still fun.
And to your point about the goofiness, there are enough convincing straight man performances. You have like William Fichtner as like the actual NASA astronaut, the like team mission leader. You have Jason Isaacs, you have Billy Bob Thornton playing very convincing, like serious, like we are committed to like making this a legit movie, that it works. Like every oil rig character that goes up into space is a caricature, but each of them are different enough that they build this team. Each one is so fitting in this disaster movie puzzle piece that you get invested in all of them. And when, spoiler alert, some of them don't make it back, like you feel it.
It also gave us, I think, the greatest commentary track of all time, which is when Ben Affleck says that he asked Michael Bay why it was easier to train oil drillers to be astronauts rather than astronauts to be oil drillers, and Michael Bay told him to shut the fuck up. I think that alone, I think, is worth any dumb moments of this movie.
Absolutely. And I do want to mention, like you said, the cast with the seriousness side of it, and the oil riggers are cartoonish in a way, but they also are a real team. You feel that chemistry between like Owen Wilson and Ken Campbell. They make these like great moments that you feel they know each other. You feel they're just enough. It's not like it's not like a character case. You're not gonna like really know these guys, but you know them enough that you care about them, and you want to laugh along with them. So I do like that as well.
So speaking of teaching things to be something different, let's go to a movie where we're teaching robots to be cars, and that's 2007's Transformers, the first in a myriad of Transformer films in this franchise, and arguably the best one directed by Michael Bay. Bumblebee, I think, is pretty good, but he did not direct that one. So we're going with the first is the best because the rest are pretty crap. But
You about summed it up.
this was just kind of the wild card pick. I really enjoyed this movie as someone who has I'll say a tacit knowledge of the source material Transformers. Like I had the toys, I watched the cartoons every now and then. This was fun. It did the job. Robots, cars, fighting each other in the city. I don't really care what Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox did. I wanted to see the robot cars fight. And they did that. And again,
did it well.
This movie was surface level enough is why it worked. It didn't get in so heavy in the lore that I'm like falling asleep after hour 3 that some of these movies got to be. I think that's why these movies worked, outside of the loud, booming, metal screeching sounds that made me want to go deaf.
Yeah, I don't love this movie, but I understand why it was a hit.
I was going to say the same thing. Like we actually talked about this beforehand, like when we were setting up this show. We're like, well, this is the 4th movie. I'm like, there's other movies I'd rather talk about from Michael Bay, but this makes sense if you're going to talk about Michael Bay because it is it's a moment in his filmography that's really important. Because whether we like it or not, he did end up like running a whole franchise, and you could say he ran it into the ground. But the original one was. I think it's kind of forgotten and overshadowed because of the shit that followed. I think it's kind of like underrated now in a way. Because if I go back and watch this, I kind of go, yeah, it's not that bad. It's kind of a fun piece. For exactly what you say, you get what you want out of it. It's not overdrawn. They don't worry about like going too deep into the mythology, the lore. And I don't know the lore very much. So I don't know how badly it does at all. But it gives me exactly what I want. It has some humor in it. It has some robots transforming into cars and fighting each other. What else do you really want? And it's good cast enough. Like then Josh Duhamel's good in it. Anthony Anderson's decent in it as well.
You get John the whole plate.
The whole plate. But yeah, it's fine. It's fine for what it is. I don't go back and revisit it very often. I got to be honest with you. I haven't seen some of the last Transformers. I didn't even bother to see it.
Neither have I.
So I might never see it. Unless I have to do it for a podcast sometime, which happens with us. You know?
I will say it was really great to hear Peter Cullen voice Optimus Prime. Yeah. That was also a big positive. Hearing these voices come and do these Autobot and Decepticon characters was a punch of nostalgia that if they didn't have that, if they cast someone else to try and either emulate or do different voices for these characters, would have been a big downtick on this film. So I'm glad that they got these voice actors to reprise some of these roles. Well, speaking of cars going fast, let's go to our final film. This was Jack's pick, and also Michael Bay's most recent film, the 2022 smash hit that saved cinema, Ambulance. Jack, turning the floor over to you.
Yeah, saved cinema, I think, is the perfect way to describe this movie. I have a bit of a story about seeing this movie. There was a screening that was happening here in Los Angeles, hosted by network that shall not be named, let's say. But they were hosting the screening with Michael Bay doing a Q&A, and me and my friends on a whim decided, yeah, let's go to this. The movie is 2 hours and 15 minutes. The Q&A was an hour and a half, because Michael Bay, first of all, actually came like 15 minutes late to the Q&A, but when he was there, answered every single question that everyone had, told incredible stories about working on both this film, but also working on his other movies. And it was really that movie plus the experience of hearing him talk about it was the thing that sort of turned me around on Michael Bay, because I'd heard before that he was not the best person to be on set with, kind of a control freak, kind of an asshole, but it's clear how much he cares about movie making and cares about the movies that he likes making. And Ambulance is clearly a movie that he loved making. This movie has 5 minutes of setup, and from there it's go, 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 go. It is nonstop. The characters are so easy to define, but also that works perfectly. It has one of my favorite performances of this year in it. I think that if there was any justice in the world, Jake Gyllenhaal would be in the conversation for Best Supporting Actor. He is phenomenally funny in this movie. He has an incredible line where he casually mentions the fact that he has herpes, and it's never brought up again.
I wish I didn't have herpes, but we got to go with what we got.
Exactly that. It is amazing. There are dumb things about this movie, of course, but there are also just genuinely really good things. But the action is so well done. And I know I made fun of the use of drones, but there are some legitimately really impressive drone shots in this movie. Something will fly under the car and then go to show the windshield, and the take will just continue from there. And he was talking, Michael Bay talked about the fact that he found these like 19-year-old kids on YouTube who were doing drone shots and hired them to work on his movie. So I think it's really cool that, yes, this is a technique that you're employing, but it's also a way for you to employ young filmmakers. And again, that's something that I just really respect about the way that he chooses to approach movie making.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say right there, this is everybody on this film understood the assignment. It's a small budget comparatively compared to like his like Transformers and everything else. And I sometimes think small budget Michael Bay or smaller budget Michael Bay can be a better Michael Bay because he has to do that he has to inform that kind of guerrilla filmmaking in a way. Like you said, the drone work that he did, everything had its purpose in the movie. And you're right, they knew right away, like this is not a story movie. This is a give you the setup and then just let it go. And that's what they do. And this does harken back to what we were talking about before when it comes to those 90s action films. You get good actors like a Jake Gyllenhaal and a Yahya Mateen and like Isaac Gonzalez. And like, it's like, they know what the role is and they give it a legitimacy that might not be there if it's just like thrown out with like some newcomers that don't know what they're doing. I love this movie unabashedly. I saw it in the theaters. I was very sad that it didn't kind of catch on like it could have in a way. Because I feel like we could use a lot more of these in the theaters, these like small budget action films, because there's a place for them and it's a fun time. And I feel like they're getting lost amongst it has to be the IP, it has to be the big budget, Marvel movies and things like that. I want to see some more stuff like this because it's just a fun time to do, and you can do it on a lesser level, and it works.
Michael Bay's the kind of director I wish his name sold movies.
Yeah,
because I feel like when he has a movie like this that's really good, people would turn out in droves to see it. But 100%. Unfortunately, because of like the reputation that he's gotten with the Transformers films, his name doesn't really sell a movie like this, even when the movie's really good.
Back in the 90s, I think it kind of did, but not anymore. I think,
and like obviously we've like shifted away from director selling movies at this point, except for that's prestige directors.
Yes,
but like bring back the action director selling.
Yeah, give me a Tony Scott. That's what we'd like. This kind of films like that. I also want to throw out there for Ambulance, another good thing that made my heart sore is afterwards I saw this interview on Variety on YouTube where they asked the cast, both Jake and Gaia, who they would be what their favorite Michael Bay movie was and who they would want to be. And Jake Gyllenhaal did say The Rock. And he said if he was going to be anybody, it'd be a toss-up if it's Ed Harris, because anytime Ed Harris is in a movie, he wants to be Ed Harris. And that's only because he wants to be as good an actor as Ed Harris is. So all of a sudden I was sold even more on Jake Gyllenhaal if I wasn't before.
It's the funniest performance of the year.
Easily.
And it's completely like ironic. It's so good. When he says, "I am the ambulance," I want that on a shirt.
That was great. The only thing I shouldn't say anything. I almost wanted a sequel from this one. Like that was how ridiculous it was. I kind of wanted
fire truck.
I would watch these characters in any situation that causes them to be driving through a somehow untrafficked Los Angeles.
Right, exactly. That's perfect.
That was also just something that made me laugh so hard was like, yeah, right, there's no one on the streets. Yeah, right, we have to wait for rush hour. No way. Rush hour is from like 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. here. Sorry.
So I didn't love this movie as much as you, but I do think it deserves a second viewing on my part. I think mostly because I was so flabbergasted from the start. I was in the theater. It was just me. So I just pulled up my phone and started taking stream of conscious notes. And to save time, I'm just going to highlight some of my favorites that I wrote down. And heads up, there will probably be some spoilers. So if you haven't seen Ambulance and you want to, maybe like skip ahead like 2 minutes. First, why does Jake Gyllenhaal talk so fast and then suddenly so loud? No wonder the heist didn't work when most of your crew are literally idiots. I'd rather watch a movie of Garrett Dillahunt and his Mastiff driving around in a Fiat. Let's see. Thanks to the product placement, I now want a lean cuisine. This movie is an unintentional argument for defunding the police. 2 lines that are spoken back to back. I don't think they like cops here. Was your hand in my stomach? Things there is an unlimited amount of in this movie. Blood in the human body and gas in the ambulance. Finally, so is this an Isa Gonzalez becoming Batman origin story?
Oh, I kind of like the last one for sure, actually.
That was my one of many stream of consciousness notes when watching this film. Reading that back, I'm like, why didn't I like this movie? So I might need to go back and watch it, just based on my rereading my notes from the film.
I feel like it is the kind of movie that if you're the wrong space in your head when you go see it, you're not going to like it. But as long as you're in the right Michael Bay space, you're going to love it.
Fair.
Michael Bay also bullied one of my friends at the Q&A. It was kind of hilarious.
Did you really?
Like, not like bullied him, but it was like he's like look at, like, everybody was like sitting up watching the Q&A except for my friend who was like leaning back in his AMC chair with his like soda. But it was like all you fucking idiots are just sitting here like, ooh, what's he gonna say next? Except for this guy. This guy, like, here, stand up. Look at this guy. He's doing it right.
That's awesome.
Well, there is probably much more we could say regarding Michael Bay films, but I do think it is time we get into our fantastic castings. Here, each of us will cast the 4 main members of the Fantastic Four: Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, Ben Grimm, and their nemesis, Dr. Doom, with an actor or actress Michael Bay has worked with previously and who have not had a major role in the MCU. Paul, as our guest, you will be going first.
The MCU thing threw me a couple times, as you know. I got to cast one. Oh, I can't use him. Oh, wait, I can't use Hugo Weaving. Oh, wait, I can't use Jake Gyllenhaal. Okay. You're going to be interested to know when I read you my cast list, it kind of spoils a little bit of my initial pitch, but we are going within the old Fantastic Four, like an old man Logan kind of situation in a way. This is an old team that's been around for a while. That's all I'm going to say about the pitch. Going into actually who I cast. Well, first off, as old Reed Richards, you knew I had to use him somewhere. It had to be undone. So Ed Harris is my Reed Richards. I will say I initially had Ed Harris as Doom because I had Hugo Weaving as my old Reed Richards, which I liked. But then I went Red Skull, can't use him. So I switched back, and I think Ed Harris works for me if you put him in his Truman Show vibe, a Truman Show / Apollo 13 vibe. I think he can play an aloof scientist in control of things. I do think it would fit the role pretty well. His wife, Sue, older Sue, is a wonderful, talented, lovely Frances McDormand. I think that if anyone has charisma that Sue Storm has, and if anyone could match Ed Harris, I think that couple right there is an acting couple that could blow anybody away. I think they would have a great chemistry together. I think Sue is a powerhouse, and I think Sue is probably the most powerhouse on the Fantastic Four as far as personality goes, because Reed's like the quiet leader, gets intense at times. Sue's the emotional. Johnny's emotional, but Sue is the emotional heart. Johnny's more of the emotional fireball. No pun intended. Well, pun probably half intended at least. So Frances McDormand fits that.
Puns are always intended on the Fancast at 4 podcast.
Always. That's a good. I think I have my Johnny and my Ben. I like more than anything else though, because I don't think they're very. You wouldn't think of them in these roles, but I think they work if you just take an instance and think about it. For old Johnny Storm, I'm going to have Nick Cage. At his Nick Cageiest, because there's something about a cocky Nick Cage, cocky old Nick Cage, who's been around the block for a while. He's probably, again, pun half intended, a little burnt out by now at this point. I do like him in the role. I think it's a fun thing, and I want to see old Nick Cage palling around, starting fights with old Ben Grimm, played by Keith David. There's nothing like a good old Keith David, solid as a rock, pun again, half intended, solid as a rock casting. I think those two could play off each other very well. They could have the rivalry that's needed, and yet they'd have the chemistry that they love each other deep down, which is the crux of the Johnny-Ben relationship. And then to round it out, for my Dr. Doom, I went with Michael Shannon, who I love. Michael Shannon. I think this is exactly the kind of role Michael Shannon could play well. I mean, it plays a little bit with his Zod from Man of Steel, so it's not too far off in a way, but it's definitely different enough that he will take it and run with it and be the arrogant bastard that he can be. So those are my old Fantastic Four.
Great cast. I mean, a lot of acting firepower there, as you mentioned. So really, no notes. I'm excited to see how older Fantastic Four and Doom play into your pitch. I'm sure you have some surprises, some twists and turns for us, but really everything makes sense. And like you mentioned about Ed Harris, I could have seen him as Reed or Doom, but like we see in a lot of cast in comics and movies, Reed and Doom were kind of foils of each other.
Yes.
You look in the mirror and you could see Reed one day, you could see Doom the other. So it makes sense that you had Ed Harris as Doom and then easily slotted him in as Reed Richards.
Yeah, also I get to see Ed Harris's face more too, so it worked out for me better.
There you go.
Jack, you're up next with your Fantastic Forecast.
So I started with my villain and then built the cast around that. But I'll run down real quick. For my Reed Richards, I actually use someone who's also in Paul's pitch, but my Reed Richards is going to be Frances McDormand.
Interesting.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
I think Frances McDormand is a wonderful, wonderful actress, as would most people. I think she can bring a gravitas to be the leader of the Fantastic Four. As my Sue Storm, I picked Kate Beckinsale, who is in Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor, but I think that she has shown time and again that she's got some real chops, and I think that I would love to see her as Sue Storm. As Johnny Storm, I picked David Denman, which correct me if I'm wrong, I believe David Denman was he a choice for the Burton episode?
He was my Ben Grimm.
Right. He's going to be my Johnny Storm for this. Ben Grimm is great casting for David Denman, but in terms of a Michael Bay Fantastic Four movie, I figured I had to pick John Goodman as Ben Grimm / The Thing. Thank you, Michael Bay, for casting a bunch of actors as voice roles in the Transformers films. You've given me a plethora of actors to choose from. And my Dr. Doom. Listeners, I think that you all probably know where this is going. If you're a recurring listener of the Fantastic Four podcast,
one of our tens of loyal viewers,
there are dozens of you I know, then you know that I have a certain affinity for a lovely actor from Boston, Massachusetts, my hometown. I have an affinity for this actor. I have such an affinity for them that I have not only cast them as Dr. Doom once, not only as Dr. Doom twice, for the third time, my Victor Von Doom is Mark Wahlberg.
A definite trend is being sensed here.
Dan sounds so thrilled by this.
No, I mean, like I said, I've heard your pitches in the past. I don't have notes on it. Like, why? I'm just angry to see how you're going to make it work again.
Dan, what are you talking about? It's going to be a great Victor Von Doom. I don't know what you mean.
He's a scientist, right?
He's an inventor.
An inventor.
This could be a game changer for me. If I can apply this technology to my inventions, we never have to work again.
I love it. I'm all on board.
He is not going to be from Texas, though. Don't worry, listeners. Victor Von Doom will not be a Texan.
Nice. Oh God. I also got to say, I want to throw out there, I love the John Goodman pick. That was actually something I was very close to doing at some point until I wanted to change it with Keith David. But right before I went in Keith David, it was John Goodman. So
now this is a man who knows it's clobbering time.
Yeah, again, great cat. Like I said, a lot of star power, top to bottom. With again, David Denman probably being the least of them, but still a very good actor, and he'll be propped up by some pretty damn good men and women around him. For my cast, I feel like I went pretty kind of standard, I guess. I wanted a mix of, quality actors, but I wanted to play into the action, the Bay, the explosions, the fun, the filmmaking that he is known for. And I also wanted to kind of go with people who maybe could use a boost by Marvel's prowess. Whether this is actually an MCU movie or not, that's for later. But for my Reed Richards, I went with an actor who appeared in the original Michael Bay Transformers film. I actually originally know him from the soap opera All My Children, where he made an appearance. It was my mom's favorite at the time. And that is Josh Duhamel. For Sue Storm, I am pairing him up with his wife from Love, Simon. She appeared in 2001's Pearl Harbor, and that is Alias's Jennifer Garner. Johnny Storm, I'm going with Chaos Incarnate, also from the Transformers film, Mr. Shia LaBeouf. I don't feel like any explanation is really needed when it comes to him being Johnny Storm. For my Ben Grimm, I felt very inspired by this one. This one changed a lot, but once I finally stuck with this actor, I was really, really excited and happy for it. I'm going with an actor who is in one of my all-time favorite TV shows as Dr. Cox in Scrubs. He was in The Rock, as previously mentioned. That is the eminent John C. McGinley as the Thing. Finally, I am going to Armageddon for my Doctor Doom, and maybe not a choice you would initially think, but he played the Russian cosmonaut Peter Stormer as my Doctor Doom. And hopefully from my pitch, you'll understand all of these casting choices. And just a heads up, my pitch is really dumb. And by dumb, I mean great.
I will say my pitch is also really dumb. I'm not sure it's great, but it's definitely dumb.
Guys, this is crazy. We all have dumb pitches tonight.
Well, it is fitting, let's face it.
Well, with our films cast, it is now time to pitch our Michael Bay helm Fantastic Four films.
But before we get into those pitches, I do have two questions for all of us.
Ooh.
First, are your films origin films?
Yes-ish.
Not for the Fantastic Four.
Interesting. Mine is kind of the opposite. No, but for the Fantastic Four, yes. Which will, again, make sense shortly. Second question. Are your films part of the MCU?
Not yet.
Interesting.
No.
Dear God, I hope mine is not. So
I do want to say, when I say not yet, it's at the end, it's a potentially could be, but at some point.
Let's see your pitch and hear.
Okay. All right.
So, you know what, since you did interject, you are our guest. You will get first dibs, first crack at pitching us a Michael Bay Fantastic Four film. So, Paul, take it away.
All right. Well, we start off with some kind of montage with the Fantastic Four throughout the years, just beating up villains left and right. It could be anybody. You could get some cameos in there. You could probably get some famous cameos, which I didn't end up casting. I'm going to let that be the director's choice. Michael could choose that anytime he needs to. We're going to get a little bit of history there, just a little bit of history there as we go. And then we get to the point where we start off, we're in a feature at a celebration that's honoring the Fantastic Four and also honoring Franklin Richards, because Franklin Richards is now old enough as part of the team to a degree, not an official member of the Fantastic Four, but he works with them enough. I have Franklin Richards being played by Freddie Stroma, also used by Michael Bay as well. So I did keep that, the fan base getting going on there. So they're going to have some heroic deeds are to make place. We start behind the scenes, and we see that the Fantastic Four on the surface, as far as everybody else knows, is a happy family. But realistically, Reed and Sue are about to get divorced. Ben and Johnny are at their wits' end with each other, and over a woman, Ben and Johnny are no longer speaking to each other at this point. It's the end of the road for Fantastic Four. They're going to come get their celebration in front of the cameras, receive their award for saving lives over and over again, finally having vanquished all the villains that they possibly could have vanquished, they know of. And it was going to be right here that they're going to announce the disbandment of the Fantastic Four. So they get out there, they get their awards. Just about the time where Reed Richards steps forward, suddenly the sky is filled with Doombots. Dr. Doombots are everywhere, left and right. We get a big Michael Bay action sequence right in the beginning because that's what we need. We need to get right in their dumb things. They're fighting with each other, and it seems like they're not quite in sync anymore. Like Ben and Johnny, they miss up things. Whereas before they would have been a team, they would have been synced up. They're missing things left and right. They're getting hit. They're getting old. Johnny's missing out on things. He's missing his blast. He's falling down. He's getting hit a lot. They're not quite there, but they're still doing the thing. I mean, they're professionals. They're still professional heroes. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the real Doom shows up, zaps Franklin something, and Franklin goes kind of woozy. And Doom takes Franklin and then zaps the Fantastic Four with something else as they get cornered, and the Fantastic Four begin to disappear. Like it's kind of a woozy, kind of like almost the heat wave kind of thing. We don't know what's going on. Everybody doesn't know what's going on. Franklin awakens enough to reach out and grab a hold of Sue. Doom holds on to him as well. So all of a sudden, whoom, there's a blackout. They wake up. Fantastic Four, Franklin, and Doom all wake up on an unknown planet. Of course, right away, the Fantastic Four and Doom are going to fight, right? But at some point, Franklin's saying this isn't going to help anybody. Franklin breaks up the fight and says, we have to figure out where the hell we are now. What did you do to Doom? And Doom's not going to say anything because he's like, I'm not going to say anything to you. This is my thing. He's not going to be the evil villain. But eventually they figure out that he has sent the Fantastic Four to the negative zone. Something that he has discovered in this. Doom discovered the negative zone and was sending him the Fantastic Four there so that he could get rid of them and so he could take over the world. But of course, Franklin foiled his plans by Doom is there now. At this point, when they finally make the determination where they're going to have to work together to get home, because Doom has no idea how to get home at this point, because all of his stuff was left behind. They wake up and they're captured by an army of forces that are led by Annihilus, played by the great Ken Watanabe. Love having him in anything. Again, thank you for using the voices again for Transformers. Make the perfect villain choice at that point. Now, Annihilus senses the power levels of Franklin and combines them, and he figures that combining him with his cosmic power rod that he has, he might be able to bring their forces to Earth to take over, something he's been looking to do for a while. He's seen Earth as a distance. That's his goal, is to expand his kingdom out. He saw all the heroes on the Earth that he wanted to get to, but never could really make it there. With Franklin's powers, he could possibly do it. Franklin also, though, kind of has a connection with it. He senses the power within the rod and thinks that maybe if he harnesses that power, he could open a portal home. So Annihilus takes Franklin and then imprisons the rest. And Annihilus plans to drain the power from Franklin. He decides to have a little bit of a to pass the time kind of moment. What are you going to do with that place? You're going to have gladiator combat. So Annihilus decides to pit the Fantastic Four against each other in combat and tells them if they fake it, they will all be killed. So we have Sue pretending not to be a warrior and Annihilus and tricking Annihilus. So she sits out of the battle because she's just a woman. And Annihilus is not going to, like, you're not going to, I won't make a woman fight. The woman should be, you know, what does he know? He's sexist, evil, bad guy. Shocking. So Sue goes to sit out with Franklin. They pit up Ben versus Johnny and Doom versus Reed. I mean, that's some battle sequences here again, a lot of fun there. But at some point, Sue is able to sneak free and gets Franklin. And they were able to steal a rod from Annihilus while the battles are going on. And they jump into the arena. Doom is closest to them and strikes Sue. He grabs Franklin, and portal does open. He gets the portal open, and Doom and Franklin jump in. Now, Franklin is able to blast Doom enough to keep it open while Fantastic Four jump through as well. But Annihilus also sees the Doom up and decides to grab some of his troops and also go over at the same time. And everyone's fighting over the control rod. Annihilus and Doom are right next to each other. There's this big giant blast of the cosmic rod. Almost seems like it explodes. The portal closes, bright light strikes. And then all of a sudden, we all wake up in kind of different places. Annihilus ends up on Earth with a rod looking around at his troops and Doom. And Doom happily starts talking about they are in his home turf now. They're in the kingdom of Latveria. And a voice suddenly says, "My kingdom of Latveria, imposter." And it's a younger version of Dr. Doom. And we realize we've traveled back in time. And this Doom is played by Pablo Schreiber. And then we flash forward to the Fantastic Four also waking up. And they're together, the four of them there. And then an alarm bursts forth. They suddenly look around, what's going on? What's going on? They circle up and they wait to see what's happening. And suddenly they are surrounded by the younger Fantastic Four. What a revolting development this is. And the younger Fantastic Four is played by Keir O'Donnell from Ambulance as young Reed, Melanie Laurent as young Sue, Ben Hardy as young Johnny, and Corey Hawkins as young Ben Grimm. And that's where we end the movie because it's only part one of two. And part two is going to be the battle among battle. And that's where it might lead into the MCU because we don't know where this younger story is taking place or where the older story is taking place. We don't necessarily know yet. I leave that in the hands of the sequel.
I think you might be the first person to pitch a part one of a movie, but not give us the part two. I want the part two now, Paul.
Well, I might have to do that. Maybe I'll come back and be a guest there later on for a follow-up.
Some different director takes over part two. There was creative differences with Michael Bay.
Yeah, he wanted the movie to be creative.
That's what it was.
No, that was great. I do feel like it is, Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like a spiritual sequel to my pitch from last week in the Zemeckis episode, which I loved.
It kind of does, yeah.
Which is surprised. I mean, I say spiritual sequel very specifically with just how the pitch goes, but no, I liked it. Nerdy, Fantastic Four, lots of villains, lots of callbacks, time travel, checks a lot of boxes. I dig it.
I didn't throw in the emotional beats. Of course, the emotional beats would continue throughout as Sue and the Fantastic Four would obviously learn to work together again.
The classic Michael Bay emotional beats, totally.
Of course.
Bingo. That's what I was going for.
Jack, it is your turn to make me viscerally angry with your probably brilliant pitch. So with that in mind, floor is yours.
Prepare to be disappointed, Dan, because you can't really talk much about action. But here we go. We open on a full-scale nuclear attack. There's panic, armies being rolled out, a United States flag is being flown. Fall back, someone yells, and a squadron begins to retreat, running for their lives. A soldier falls down, unnoticed by the other soldiers except for one. He runs over to his fallen brother, trying to help him up. "Come on," he says. "We're almost back to base. You got this. Stay with me. Hey, what's your name, man? What's your name?" An explosion behind them. They duck. "What's your name? Come on. You gotta talk to me here, okay? Come on, talk to me here." George, here, I'm Victor. We're going to get you back to base, okay, George? Come on, you hear me? Let's go. George and Victor get up and run, firing shots up behind them. "George, come on, we're almost there," Victor shouts. But before they can both reach the base, a great ball of fire shoots down from the sky. George notices, but Victor doesn't. Without a second's hesitation, George pushes Victor out of the way, taking the brunt of the burn. George, Victor shouts, but it's too late. George burns, and Victor can do nothing but watch. He looks up at the sky and sees 4 figures racing across it like comets. He takes aim, but before he can fire any shots, he's dragged back into the base by his fellow soldiers. What the hell was that? Victor says. Back up, a general, played by Ed Harris, tells him. Von Doom, look, you've been a top-ranking soldier for the past few years, but you're getting slow. We're sending you out of Latveria. You're going home. You can't do that, Von Doom says. I'm about to be made admiral. This is ridiculous. Orders came down straight from the top. I don't know what to tell you. You'll be honorably discharged and sent on the first flight back. Von Doom gathers his things, gives one last look at his base, and gets on the plane, anger brewing. When he returns home, he sees on television a news story that says, Fantastic Four save Latveria. This, of course, angers Victor. These people are being touted as heroes when the military were the ones who were saving the country until they killed a soldier. This won't do. Von Doom, angry and in training montage, plots to take down the Fantastic Four from inside of the Baxter Building, the home of the Four. It's the day of Doom's plan. He goes to the Baxter Building and, using his Doom bots, holds everyone hostage. This alerts the Fantastic Four, who had anticipated a quiet day up to this point. They get into the action, and for a straight 2 hours, we have an extended action sequence of Von Doom fighting the Fantastic Four one at a time. There's, of course, a subplot about the police and the U.S. military deciding whether or not to intervene with superheroes, but Von Doom successfully takes out Ben, Johnny, and Sue. The battle with Reed, however, is one of wits, one that Von Doom is successfully able to coerce Reed into. You call yourselves heroes? You're not heroes. Heroes in the military. What are you? A superhero? There's nothing super about you, man. Fantastic. You're not fantastic. Reed realizes that Von Doom is right. She walks out of the building completely on her own and lets the police and the military know it's okay. We're going to handle it. Reed and Von Doom go up to the penthouse of the Baxter Building, have a discussion. You think it's going to be going in this way where Victor Von Doom's going to see the wrongs that he had done and that they're going to come to some sort of peace offering. One more giant explosion occurs. Reed is blasted away. Von Doom somehow survives the explosion, but then he looks up, sees something giant floating in the rubble of the explosion. Something's going towards him. Looks down at Reed. You were responsible for my death. Now I'll be responsible for yours. The thing kills Reed Richards. Fantastic Four are dead. It turns to Von Doom. It's got no arms, no legs, but it's a pretty big head. You remember me? It asks Von Doom. George? Von Doom asks. George Tarleton was a soldier, the head says. A man who took orders. Let's not take orders anymore, Victor. How about we team up? Sounds great, but George doesn't feel quite right to me, does it? I agree, the head says. Call me MODOK. That's my Michael Bay movie. It was a short pitch, but again, I'm sure Michael Bay will insert all of the most amazing action sequences we've ever seen.
I felt like I was right there.
Again, that's the thing. Like that's the ambulance for you. You know, you get like that setup and then you're right into the action. That's the movie that I want from Michael Bay.
Absolutely.
No, yeah, great. I like it. There were twists, turns, explosions, and the classic Michael Bay emotional thread that was getting pulled. Loved it.
The emotional thread of the military.
What a great Mark Wahlberg voice you have. Just want to let you know again.
He's made a few appearances.
I know.
It's just something that everyone in Boston is born with.
Probably.
You wake it. You come out of the womb and you can be Mark Wahlberg. The guy does his job. You must be the other guy.
That sounds like a horror movie. You come out of the womb and you sound like Mark Wahlberg. That is the stuff of nightmares.
God, I love it. I love it.
No.
That sounds like a Shyamalan movie in and of itself.
Oh, yeah.
That is
all
the
right.
next pitch. I love
Dan,
it.
I'm so excited to hear your
Yes, let's hear it.
Hey,
Get ready to go.
Flex.
See, I gave you something easy to follow this time. You know, I figured after Zemeckis, I would give you a little leg up. So
don't
let's hear what you got.
patronize me, Jack Mayer. But regardless. Alice, my stupid, dumb, great pitch to prime things. I will give you the title of this stupid, dumb, great pitch. Fantastic Four-mageddon, with the A in Armageddon being a 4, like it all should be. Again, Fantastic Four-mageddon. We open with news stations warning of another threat from space. A gigantic unknown object is approaching Earth. It is another cataclysmic threat of galactic proportions. Similarly to what we saw 25 years prior, objects of non-earthly materials are crashing into the planet, causing massive devastation. And of course, thousands of explosions cascade across the screen. We cut to Kelsey Grammer, who is now playing the head of NASA, and he says to no one in particular, "We need them again," and he picks up the phone. Over his shoulder, there are pictures of Harry Stamper, previously played by Bruce Willis, and Billy Bob Thornton's Dan Truman, indicating he too has passed over the last 25 years. Here, we proceed to a montage of Ben Affleck's AJ Frost and his oil rig team getting the call, all of them giving AJ a look of acknowledgement, though there is no indication why they know who AJ talked to on the phone. Clips of them traveling to NASA, training, and preparing to take off back into space are also featured. And we cannot forget Liv Tyler's Grace, well, Grace Frost now, not Grace Stamper, because she's married to AJ, if you saw the first Armageddon movie, there to see her husband and friends off to save the world again. The launch countdown commences with the camera switching from close-ups of all the characters we have met so far. That includes Ben Affleck, Steve Buscemi, William Fichtner, Will Patton, Owen Wilson's mysteriously missing, and some other, background characters. And then, as these flashes between characters are going, we of course get a stripped-down, modern cover of I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, but this time it's sung by Billie Eilish. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The shuttle launches and we get many sweeping drone shots of the rocket soaring through the sky. But just before it breaches the outer atmosphere, the screen at Mission Control starts to static and a menacing laugh over the PA comes on. Then a deep Russian accent. I'm not going to do the Russian accent, by the way.
Do the accent.
It'll sound Swedish. You thought you could forget about me? On the screen appears Lev Andropov, played by Peter Stormare, reprising his role from Armageddon. He was the Russian cosmonaut the original team met on the Russian space station. However, his face is half covered in a metal mask. I was supposed to be a hero, but what did I get when I returned home? Torture and ruin. They said, how could I let the Americans take what should have been Russian glory? I should have had riches and women, but I was shut away in a dark Siberian lab. When I was not working or sleeping, I was getting beaten, with no actual explanation why he was getting beaten, but just let's go with it. But I have shown them, and soon I will show you. I went up to space as Lev Andropov, Russian cosmonaut, but here before you, I am only doom. The video returns to the shuttle, but we hear shouts and alarms ringing. Something's wrong up here, AJ yells. On another video feed, we see an energy beam streaking through the sky, and before anything could be done, it hits the ship, obliterating it into nothingness. The room at NASA is stunned as we pan to Kelsey Grammer, and slowly zooming into his expression, we see his face shift from shock to anger to determination. It's time for Plan B. The picture goes black, and then across the screen flashes NASA Co. I wanted to go with SNASA for Secret NASA, but that I didn't want to steal the joke. So NASA Co, which stands for NASA Covert Operations. Totally a thing. We find ourselves in what looks like a lab with lots of experimental space tech. We see Jason Isaacs, Ronald Quincy hang up the phone and turn to the 4 people in the room. Mr. Richards, are you and your team ready? Operation Avenger failed. Operation Fantastic has been activated. Reed gives an inquisitive look. We haven't had a lot of opportunity to test all the tech, but I guess we really don't have much choice, do we? Reed, we can't ask some of the astronauts to do this with the tech untested. We don't know the damage it could cost. We're dealing with alien materials here, and we don't know how they'll react. It is here we get a flashback to some quick scenes revealing that some of the members of the original Armageddon team had extracted some strange bioluminescent material from the first asteroid. That substance had been since tested and used to create space propulsion, shielding, and other weapons tech for deep space missions NASA Co had. We return to the lab. Sue is right, Reed, Ben chimes in. Well, that just means it's up to us then, an excited Johnny announces. The 4 give each other looks of acknowledgement. After an undetermined amount of time, we see the 4 members of Operation Fantastic set in a futuristic spacecraft. Reed is set as mission leader. Sue is responsible for maintaining life support, shields, and other vital ship functions. Johnny is the weapons specialist, and Ben is the pilot. We go through a similar launch sequence like the scenes we previously saw with Operation Avenger, but this time it's Billie Eilish covering Elton John's Rocket Man. Also, by the way, if you've never heard William Shatner's version of Rocket Man, it is arguably the funniest thing on the face of the planet. So once you're done listening to the podcast, Google William Shatner singing Rocket Man. It is hilarious. Back to the movie. As the ship propels into space, a similar appearance by Doom occurs. Did you not learn your lesson the first time? Well, say bye-bye now, as a second energy beam streaks across the sky. Sue, activate the shields. Copy, Reed, and she hits some buttons on the console. As the beam strikes the ship, there's another explosion. Those at NASA and NASA Co. hold their breath, but the ship emerges unscathed. Way to go, sis, Johnny cheers. Over the PA system, Doom sneers and angrily replies, you cannot find reliable space lasers these days. I guess I'll have to do this myself. The feed cuts out, and moments later, we see another ship in the distance of space. It is Doom, in pursuit of the Operation Fantastic ship. Reed, we have company, Ben announces. Evasive maneuvers, Ben. If we can find an opening, we have the coordinates of the galactic threat. Let's try and warp jump there. Here we're relying on the audience to understand what warp jumping is in context, so we're not going to get into the science of it. I'm trying my best here, Reed, but the ship, as good as it is, can only stretch itself so far. Reed, totally serious, says, then we will stretch it as far as it will go. The crew, pursued by Doom, are racing through an asteroid belt of leftover rock from the previous asteroid, iron ferrite bouncing off the shields. Johnny, we have to take out this debris, Reed directs. Cannon's hot. Time to flame on, Johnny roars as he opens fire on the space debris. Most of the second act is a race through the space debris and avoiding the barrages from Doom's ship. You will not get away from me this time. I will be the hero, even if I have to be the bad guy first, Doom proclaims as more explosions, somehow heard in space, rush over the comms. Once Ben gets the ship clear of the asteroid belt, Reed, we have an opening. Punch it, Ben. Ben slams a big red button and the ship zooms away, just as Doom is locking his weapons on the ship. Furthermore, the pulse caused by the warp jump impacts Doom's ship and blasts him into a large piece of space debris, stranding him there. You will not strand me again! You will not! Are the last things they hear from Doom over the comms. As the four travel through warp space, they take a moment to collect themselves. But as they approach the end of the warp tunnel, more alarms start going off. Reed, we're getting readings of another life form ahead. Guns ready, Johnny chimes in. Easy, Johnny, we don't know what it could be. As the ship exits out of the warp tunnel, the camera pans 360 degrees, and as if out of nowhere, another ship appears in front of them. It is a bright, shimmering silver ship. As the four move the ship closer, etched on the side it says, Silver Surfer. Sue, open comms. Let's see if anyone is on board. A tone comes over the ship. This is Reed Richards of Operation Fantastic. We're responding to your distress signal. Can you respond? After some static, the only thing heard back is, Galactus. Galactus. After a beat, well, we should check it out, Reed says. What are you talking about, Reed? We need to stay on mission, Ben protests. There could be something on that ship that helps us, Reed responds. You and Johnny stay on the ship just in case we need to make a quick getaway. Sue and Reed put on some spacesuits and prepare to board the ship. After the four's ship docks with the Silver Surfer, Sue and Reed enter without issue. As they explore the ship, they reach the cockpit to find an alien body sitting alone. Hello? Sue says, and as soon as she says that, the alien body slumps over, dead. However, a hologram appears on the console. I am Norin Rod, and this is my final message, with a voice that sounds like Alan Tudyk's. The message explains how he was the herald of the planet-consuming entity known as Galactus, but after millennia of service, he finally escaped and went off to warn other intelligent planets of his arrival. He further explains that Galactus travels the universe in search of Infinitium, the bioluminescent substance that was found on the asteroid and used to power the ship. This is what he feeds on, and he destroys planets to harvest the Infinitium. There's only one way to stop him. Sending armies and large-scale weapons have no effect on it. It takes infiltrating its body and destroying it from the inside. You must take this bit of Infinitium I was able to steal, consume it, and you will be granted with amazing powers that will help you defeat Galactus. From a drawer in the console, conveniently, emerges 4 vials of Infinitium. The last words of the message before phasing out is, "You best hurry. Galactus's hunger is never sated." Reed takes the vials, and he and Sue return to the ship. The team debates drinking the vials. Reed talks through the multiple scenarios. Ben shows some hesitation. Sue says she will go with whatever the team decides. Johnny, tired of the talk, downs his vial. Bottoms up, he smirks. With Johnny having made the decision for the team, the other three consume the vials. Here we get more montages of powers developing among the four of them, and all of them seem totally cool with it. No freaking out like normal people, with all the stretching, invisibility, self-combusting, and, being made of rocks. Once they all situate back in the ship, Reed says, Sue, do we still have tracking on Galactus? We do, Reed, she responds. Let's rock, Ben interjects as he directs the ship towards Galactus and opens another warp tunnel. Flame on, Johnny yells. No apparent reason. The ship travels through warp tunnel briefly, and after it exits, the screen is consumed immediately by the immensity of Galactus. The silent behemoth stood tall as a colossus in open space. Sue activates the stealth tech, and the ship flies to a spot where it can land. The four exit the ship, making their way up the body to Galactus' brain. Along the way, they fight all kinds of creatures that use Galactus as a symbiotic host and other security measures built into Galactus' suit. This is the third act set piece, fighting their way all across Galactus' body. Eventually, they reach the brain of Galactus, where some giant crystal is just floating in midair. Halt! A voice, which sounds like Sean Bean, booms around them. You know not what machinations with which you interfere. I am Galactus. I am cosmic power. I am cosmic purpose. Without further exposition, Reed yells, Yeah, well, we're the Fantastic fucking Four, and you are about to mess with the wrong fucking planet. Another fight set piece commences, with more creatures swarming on the four. Sue eventually creates a bubble around her and Reed while Johnny and Ben fight outside of it. The fight concludes with Reed from the bubble stretching out and wrapping his arms around the crystal, and with all of his might, pulling it free from its floating position. No! Yells Galactus. As he starts to shut down with his whole body quaking, this causes more explosions and destruction throughout the whole frame. The rest of the scene is the four racing back to the ship. Avoiding the crumbling pieces of Galactus and the subsequent explosions. Did I mention the explosions? That is pretty much the remainder of this set piece. With seconds to spare, the four make it to the ship and start pulling away. Just as they think they're safe, though, a final massive explosion sends the ship flying in an unknown direction, and the scene cuts to black. With a quick cut, we return to a shot of the ship damaged and floating aimlessly. As we zoom in, we hear an unintelligible voice. We zoom in more, and we hear Reed Richards' voice. Mayday! Mayday! This is Operation Fantastic. Mayday. And the movie ends. But during the credits, we hear a final Billie Eilish cover of Space Oddity by David Bowie. And then we get to the end credits scene. It is a shot of the asteroid belt from earlier, a pool of infinitium oozing from one of the asteroids. Suddenly, an electrified glove emerges from the ooze. And that is the end.
I'm a rocky man, running up his feelings of heaven.
I don't want to close my eyes. I don't want to fall asleep. I miss you, baby.
Don't want to miss a thing.
I'm a rockin' man.
Dan, you have made me have to now step up my game.
Components. American components.
Boom, 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 boom. Blow for
Russian
blow
components. All made in Latveria. That's what I was going to say.
That was excellent.
Thank you.
There were about three different times I thought it was going to end, and it kept going. So in that way, it was just like a Michael Bay movie.
Michael Bay movie, yeah.
And this movie is going to be 3 hours long, about an hour and a half too long.
Yeah,
purposefully.
That's about right.
That's right. This is a big budget, Michael Bay. This isn't small budget.
No.
Loved it so much, man. Billie Eilish thing was probably
it was brilliant.
Thank you. Of everything.
I was trying to think okay, who's popular enough to do a kind of slimmed down, modern kind of. This is not going to be a happy scene. This is not going to be a happy scene.
You need Gracie Abrams to do one of them. Yeah. You need Olivia Rodrigo to pop it on those tracks.
I was thinking about different people to do each one, but I'm just rolling with Billie Eilish.
It's so much funnier when it's Billie Eilish. It's just Billie Eilish doing covers for the entire soundtrack.
For a whole album, that's her album.
This is Ground Control to Major Tom.
Bravo. Bravo.
Oh, God.
You guys are the experts. That's all I gotta say there. There's a reason why you guys are hosts of the podcast. You guys bring it every single time.
It's just practice. It comes with practice.
It is. We're talking about practice here, man. Practice. It's practice.
Practice, man.
I have nothing personal against Ben Affleck, but I just really like the idea of just all of them just getting obliterated in like
That's
the
really
30
funny.
minutes, first 30 minutes of the
Gotta make
film.
room for the real boss tonight here. Come on, Dan.
I love that so much.
Oh, man.
Brilliant work, guys. Brilliant work.
Thank you. And, could keep talking, could keep heaping praises. I mean, I love hearing praise on my pitch. I could keep heaping praises on your pitches, but I do have to think that we should end our show there. We made it through our castings, our pitches for a Michael Bay Fantastic Four film. We hope you, the listeners, have enjoyed our explosion-filled exploration into this what-if scenario. We want to make a special note that the Fancast at Four podcast is hosted for free on Anchor. We encourage you, if you have your own podcast idea, to check out Anchor. It's a great resource for getting your idea off the ground. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
If you're listening on YouTube, we would greatly appreciate you hitting the subscribe button and commenting with who your Michael Bay cast would be, on what you thought of our lists and pitches, and on which director you want to see next.
I want to thank Matt Hart and Maddie Gunner for the fantastic theme music they created for us, and I certainly want to thank you, PLD, for being our guest today. I hope you had fun. Please tell our listeners where else they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter, also at Paul_DiNuzzo. Like I mentioned before, PLD Project, which is on YouTube and all sorts of Spotify, Apple, all those kind of podcasts you can find, where I do 3 basic podcasts. I do 2 Mediocre White Dudes on Film, where me and PJ Campbell go through different franchises and do some deep dives. I do have Class Action with the aforementioned Maddie Gunner and Eric Jarvie. We're basically take 2 things, they're movies, franchises, actors, directors, put them up against each other, come up with some custom-made categories, and they have a battle to the death to see who wins. And then finally, I do my Crown Jewels podcast, where I go through every song in the Queen catalog and the solo projects as well. And I determine which version of the song is the crown jewel of each song, because there's always a studio version, a live version, an edited version, a remixed version, all that stuff. I'm creating the ultimate Queen playlist. So
wait, you like Queen?
I do. I picked him out of a hat. That's why I'm making the podcast. I figured I'd just go for it.
Is it the Queen hat you currently have on?
It is, actually. That's what happened.
Interesting.
So question now. Between the original Aerosmith version of I Don't Want to Miss a Thing and the new stripped down modern version covered by Billie Eilish, what is the better version?
Oh, Billie Eilish, Crown Jewel for sure. And
I don't want to miss a thing.
The Aerosmith was my wedding song, but I'm still taking the Billie Eilish. Billie Eilish.
High praise. High praise.
And that is our show. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Jack Mayer.
And I'm Dan Bettenhausen.
And on behalf of our guest, Paul DiNuzzo, we hope you all stay fantastic.